Council, members within the chamber and those joining us online, members of the public, and to officers both here in the chamber and online. The convener's opening statement. Welcome to this meeting of Inverclyde Council. This meeting has been held remotely and also in person, and will be filmed, recorded for live and subsequent broadcast available through the Council's website. The Council is a data control under the General Data Protection Regulations and the Data Protection Act 2015. We broadcast and record Council meetings to fulfil our public task obligation to enable members of the public to observe the democratic process. Data collected during the process will be retained in accordance with the Council's public policies available through the Council's website. Members of the Council are reminded that they should follow the Council's established meeting protocols, including around the use of the chat facility, and that comments made in the chat facility are visible to all participants in the meeting, which may include members of the public who have also received invites to the meeting. Thank you. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies and declarations of interest.
We have apologies from Councillor Armstrong and Nelson. Provost will now move to a roll call before proceeding to the declarations of interest. Can the following members please indicate if they are present at the meeting, either in person or remotely? Councillor Brennan.
Present in person.
Councillor Brooks.
In chamber.
Councillor Cassidy.
Present remotely.
Councillor Clockerty.
Present in chamber.
Councillor Crowther.
Present in chamber.
Councillor Curley.
Present in chamber.
Councillor Daisley. Councillor Jackson.
In the chamber.
Councillor Law.
Present remotely.
Councillor McCabe.
Present remotely.
Councillor McCluskey.
Present in the chamber.
Councillor McCormick.
Present in the chamber.
Councillor Maguire.
Present in the chamber.
Provost Mackenzie. Councillor McVeigh.
In chamber.
Councillor Moran.
In the chamber.
Councillor Quinn.
Present remotely.
Councillor Reynolds.
Present in the chamber.
Councillor Robertson.
Present in the chamber.
Councillor Wilson.
Present in the chamber.
Are there any declarations of interest?
I just want to make a transparency declaration. I have a correction to item 7 by reason of being a member of the Great Glasgow Clyde Health Board. In deciding how to proceed on this motion, I've taken advice from the Standards Commissioner, who confirmed to me that I do not have an interest in declare by virtue of section 5.4c of the Council's Code of Conduct. I've also taken advice from officers of Great Glasgow Clyde Health Board who have confirmed my involvement today will not preclude me taking part in any future decision making regarding the out-of-hour service. And I just asked that that was recorded in a minute. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCluskey. Are there any other declarations of interest? Councillor Maguire?
Yes, thank you, Provost. I'm not sure if this needs to be noted, but I just thought I'd say anyway, under item number 8, strikes, I am a member of 2 trade unions, PCS and Unite. I don't think this precludes me from participating in this item.
So yeah, thank you, Councillor Maguire. Actually, another councillor raised it earlier. So what I was going to do, because I was conscious that a number of members were members of trade unions, I don't think this precludes members from taking part today in the discussion, debate and vote. So I was just going to simply propose that we call that for the purpose of transparency and refer to registers, councillors, registers of interest that are online.
Thank you, Mr. Sackett. Item 2 on the agenda is the minutes of the council committees, subcommittees and boards. Appointment panel, the head of Children, Families and Criminal Justice, and page 325. Councillor Moran, please.
Well, something that's a true record.
Thank you. Is there any otherwise minded? Thank you. Environment and Regeneration Committee, a special meeting held on the 30th of November 2022, page 326. Councillor McCormick.
I move this is a true record, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor McCormick. Is there any otherwise minded? I will move that the Inverclyde Council meeting on the 1st of December, 327, 333 and 334 are true and proper minutes. Is there any otherwise minded? Thank you. The appointment panel, Head of Children, Families and Criminal Justice, 5th of December 2022, page 335. Councillor Moran, please.
Ross, I move this to record.
Thank you, Councillor Moran. Is there anybody otherwise minded? Yeah. The local review body held on the 7th of December 2022, page 336, 337. Councillor McVeigh, please.
I move this to record, Provost.
Is there anybody otherwise minded? Thank you, Councillor McVeigh. The special meeting held at Inverclyde Council, the 15th of December, 338, 339. I will move that that's a true and proper minutes. Is there any otherwise minded? Thank you. The appointment panel, Director of Regeneration, Environment Regeneration, held on the 20th of December, 22, page 340. Councillor McCabe, please.
Yeah, I move the minutes of true record, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor McCabe. Is there any otherwise minded? The Social Work and Social Care Scrutiny Panel, held on the 5th of January, page 1 to 3. Councillor Jackson, please.
Yeah, I move this as a true record, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Is there any otherwise minded? Thank you. The appointment panel, Director of Environment and Regeneration, held on the 10th of January 2023, page 4. Councillor McCabe, please.
Yeah, I move the minutes of true record, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor McCabe. Any otherwise minded? Thank you. The Audit Committee held on the 10th of January 2023, page 5 and 6. Councillor Wilson, please.
I move this as a true record, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Is there any otherwise minded? Thank you. The General Purposes Board held on the 11th of January 2023, page 7. Councillor Moran, please.
I move it as a true record, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Moran. Is there any otherwise minded? Thank you. The Local Review Body held on the 12th of January 2023, page 8 and 9. Councillor McVeigh, please.
I move this to record, Provost.
Thank you. Is there any otherwise minded? Thank you. Environment and Regeneration Committee, the 12th of January 2023, pages 10 to 17. Councillor Flaherty, please.
Thank you, Provost. I move this as a true record.
Thank you, Councillor Flaherty. Is there any otherwise minded? Thank you. The Education Communities Committee held on the 24th of January 2023, page 18 to 22. Councillor Flaherty, please.
I move this as a true record, Provost.
Thank you. Is there any otherwise minded? Thank you. The Policy Resources Committee held on the 31st of January 2023, pages 23 to 28. Councillor McCabe, please.
Yeah, I move the minutes of true record, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor McCabe. Is there any otherwise minded? Thank you. The Local Review Body held on the 1st of February 2023, pages 29 to 33. Councillor McCabe, please.
I move this to record, Provost.
Thank you. Is there any otherwise minded? Thank you. The Local Police and Fire Scrutiny Panel held on the 2nd of February 2023, pages 34 to 35. The minutes, Councillor Wilson, please.
With your permission, Provost, you attended the meeting, but at this meeting, condolences were expressed upon the death of fireman Barry Martin as a result of the General's fire in Edinburgh, and that was sent on behalf of the panel and the council. Thank you for that. I can assure you this is a true record of that meeting. Thank you.
And with that addition, is everybody otherwise minded? Yeah, otherwise minded. Thank you. And the General Purposes Board held on the 8th of February 2023, pages 36, 37. Councillor Moran, please.
I'll move that it's a true record, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Moran. Is there any otherwise minded? Thank you, Councillor Moran. Thank you, members. Item 3 in the agenda is participation in the Edinburgh process and declaration. As a remit for Environment and Regeneration Committee. Mr. Jemison, would you like to comment on that, please?
Through you, Provost. Biodiversity is all of the different kinds of life you find in one area. The variety of animals, plants, fungi, and even bacteria, and each of these components and specimens, species and organisms work together in ecosystems to maintain balance and support it. The Convention on Biological Diversity post-2020 Global Framework seeks to conserve the three elements of biodiversity, namely genetics, species and ecosystems, whilst ensuring sustainable development. It's suggested that this is the most significant global conservation policy mechanism to facilitate living in harmony by nature with an aspiration of that being in place by 2050. To Mount Provost, we've had a watching brief on the Edinburgh Declaration and, Edinburgh Processing Declaration. However, now we believe that the time is right to participate in the process. It hasn't stopped us getting funding in the past, but we believe that there will be opportunities by participating in the process to get enhanced funding, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jimison. The recommendation is that the council is asked to endorse the decision of the Environmental Regeneration Committee and participate in the Edinburgh Processing Declaration. Before I ask for this endorsement, is there any member wishing to say anything? Then can we endorse the decision, please? Thank you. Item number 4 on the agenda is the proposed determination order. The Inverclyde Council Mirren Shore for Glasgow, the determination of means of exercise of public right of passage, Order 2022. It's a remit for Environment and Regeneration Committee. I would ask Mr. Strachan to comment on this, please.
Thank you, Provost. So, yes, another remit. The Environment Regeneration Committee considered this on the 12th of January, the proposed redetermination order for Mirren Shore Port Glasgow, and agreed to refer it to full council to confirm the order, and then Remit's officers to implement. And secondly, also to that council considers a proposed amendment to the scheme delegation, so that where there are no maintained objections to any proposed redetermination order, that myself will be authorised to confirm such an order going forward, so that we didn't need to take this additional step. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Strachan. The recommendations are that we approve the steps taken by the Regeneration Committee. Before we do that, is there any member wishing to comment?
I promised, I just a bit of clarification, if that's possible. Yesterday, Councillor McCormick and I went up to Mirren Shore because we had been up there because the walking group who live in the Kingston Dock use it quite regular, and it was a bit of a mess, to be honest with you. And they contacted myself, Councillor McCormick and Mr. Jimison, and we looked at it, and the council had done a substantial piece of work up there. It really looked good. But one of the problems I had beforehand was the amount of commercial vehicles who were obstructing the walkway. And yesterday, I have to say, although that it's a lovely tar path now, there is still the same problem with these vehicles. So I'm hoping that this order is somebody to give us some sort of power and ask. I mean, we don't want to affect local business, don't get me wrong, but maybe we use a bit more consideration for the walkers, you know, when they're part of these commercial vehicles, because it certainly takes away the whole condition of working with them up there. So I just want a bit of clarification on that. Will we be able to do that, Provost?
Thank you, Councillor Moran. Mr. Strachan, is that something you could do in conjunction with Mr. Jimison to look at that? And to find
Yeah, I mean, I can't. Thank you. I can't answer the question here, and if Mr. Jimison can't, then that's something that we could just come back to councillors on. So whether or not Mr. Jimison is able to today, we might have to take that one away.
Mr. Jimison?
Through you, Provost, the issue has been highlighted to officers, and we'll endeavour to ensure that the Mirren Shore area is maintained appropriately.
Thank you, Mr. Jimison. Is there any other member wishing to comment? Happy with that, Councillor Moran?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Can we agree the recommendation? Thank you. Item 5 on the agenda, service concession flexibility, accounting change proposal. It's a remit from the Policy and Resources Committee. Mr. Puckroom, please.
Thank you, Provost, and good afternoon, everyone. There's been detailed discussion within the Members' Budget Working Group and at the Policy and Resources Committee at the end of January regarding this time-limited opportunity to better align the accounting of costs against the benefits of the Council's 30-year PPP arrangement. It's all set out in the report. The financial implications are summarised on page 26 of the agenda and appendices 2 and 3 of the report. I'm happy to answer any questions that members may have on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Puckroom. Before we agree the recommendations, is there any member a question for Mr. Puckroom? Can we agree the recommendations? Good. Thank you. Item 6 on the agenda, the Inverclyde Task Force update. A report by the Director of Environment and Regeneration. Mr. Jennison, please.
Provost, through you. The Inverclyde Task Force was set up to address the socio-economic imbalance which Inverclyde currently faces. 3 meetings have taken place to date involving ministerial representation from both the UK and Scottish governments, councillors, public sector agencies and local stakeholders, with the next scheduled meeting due on Monday the 27th of March. The primary elements considered by the task force include business premises, jobs, skills and housing. Following the recent announcement by Amazon, it was considered appropriate to include the Amazon situation within the remit of the task force as an agenda item, given its impact on the community. The paper before you provides a 6-monthly update in respect of the task force's activities. And since writing the paper, Provost, we have had a couple of meetings with Amazon, and I can confirm as of today that PACE partners now have access to the Amazon site. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jennison. Do you have any questions for Mr. Jennison? Mr. Brooks, Councillor Brooks.
Thanks very much, Provost. I'm no longer part of the task group, but also I was previously representing the party within it. I just wonder if Mr. Jimson, I've had a representation from a constituent who's asked, do we believe, or does he believe, on behalf of the council, that we have the appropriate technical knowledge within the task group? Is this a strategy group that is above and beyond actually delivering? It's simply going to put a strategy forward, or is it something that's going to put meat in the bones or jobs into the community? And if that is the latter, then do we have enough technical knowledge within the task group members?
Thank you, Mr. Jennison.
Through you, Provost. I believe that we do have sufficient technical knowledge within the task group or the task force to be able to deliver both strategic and operational matters. I think it's safe to say that the ambition, which is certainly being identified within the task force, is at its highest level in terms of what I've ever seen within Inverclyde.
Thank you, Mr. Jennison. I'll go to Councillor McCabe now, and then followed by Councillor Crowder.
Thanks, Provost. Obviously, the announcement at Amazon came as a blow for us, so it is important that the task force engages with the company, and obviously we work with the government and the various agencies to try and get the best outcome from this particular potential closure. The question I was going to ask was around the Green Freeport bid. Clearly, it was positive news getting the levelling up bid approved, but it was a huge disappointment that the Scottish Government have turned down our Clyde Green Freeport bids, and I know that other council leaders within the Glasgow City region are very unhappy about that as well, and our partners on the Green Freeport bid are very unhappy, particularly given the fact that what could be perceived to be our competitor on the east coast of Scotland was granted a Green Freeport bid. So I'd be interested to know from Mr. Jamieson how our Green Freeport partnership and through the Glasgow City region were intended to engage with both the UK and Scottish governments to understand why we were unsuccessful and what support they could offer us in compensation, I have to say, because if we're looking at the relative needs of the east of Scotland versus the west of Scotland, there's far greater economic and social issues in the west of Scotland than the east of Scotland, and if the governments are committed to levelling up and inclusive growth, they should be investing in the west of Scotland before they should be investing in the east of Scotland. So I'd like to know what we're intending to do to make that case to government and to see what alternative support they can provide us with.
Thank you, Councillor McCabe. Mr. Johnson, please.
Through you, Provost. It was very disappointing that we weren't successful with our bid, but we have had feedback from both Scottish Government and UK Government officials which identified that the bid was a strong bid and it was presented to ministers for consideration. As I alluded to, we have met with government officials, and what we're looking at with our private sector partners and our public sector colleagues is a plan B to see what can be done to offset the loss of the bid for the benefit of both the Metropolitan City region and specifically ourselves in Inverclyde.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Cave, are you okay with that? And
Yeah, I'm grateful for that answer. I think it is something we need to continue to pursue, both locally, I have to say, within the task force, but also regionally within the Glasgow City region as well.
thank you, Councillor Cave. Councillor Crowder, please.
Thank you, Provost. Basically, I welcome this paper, and there is a number of questions that arise from it. The paper does give members the insight into the work that's currently been undertaken by the task force, and it also gives us the opportunity to raise some questions or clarity where that is applicable. The paper presents a number of positives and negatives. It's the negatives which underline many of the issues that are faced by Inverclyde. This brings me to a small number of questions which I would like to raise, all relating to Appendix 1, the minutes of the meeting of the Inverclyde Task Force Group on Monday the 24th of October. Now, I don't know whether you want me to raise all three or just one at a time and seek the response. I'll start with the first question anyway, and really, I know that there is preferential rates for the joint venture users, and these are available for the use of the Inverclyde Dry Dock. It is recognised that Inverclyde Dry Dock is owned by Peel, Clyde Operations Limited, and will these negotiations for the preferential rate be between Clyde Operations Limited and the individual joint venture users, or is this undertaking the responsibility of the joint venture company?
Thanks, Mr. Councillor Crowder. Before you go on, we'll get a response from Mr. Jimison. Mr. Jimison.
Through you, Provost, the negotiated rates were done on behalf of the joint venture company. So any tenant who operates from within the site of operation within the joint venture all benefit from the same discounted rate. You'll appreciate it is a commercially sensitive rate. However, if the dry dock is available, it's available on a first come, first served basis, and that would be done through the liaison between the joint venture company and Clyport Operations Limited.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm quite happy with that response. Also note that Councillor McCabe asked for an update in relation to the dry dock at Inverclyde. However, the response appears to refer to companies that are associated with the Inverclyde City deal. Has there been any conflation on each of these sites, as only Atlas Decommissioning appears to have leased the dry dock? And since this paper was published, I note that a final gazette has to dissolve Inverclyde, Atlas Decom via compulsory strike-off has been processed. Now, I do note that there is two companies here. There's an Atlas Decom, which has a standard industrial classification code, which is for demolition, and there's another company as well, which is Atlas Marine Decommissioning Services, and their classification code is for the recovery of sorted material. Could you advise which of these companies actually leased Inverclyde Dry Dock?
Mr. Phillips, please.
Through you, Provost, it's the latter.
Okay, that's fine. So that is the Inverclyde Atlas Marine Decommissioning Services Limited. That's fine, thank you. The last part that I really have relates to the understanding of the plater shed that was to be used by a company called Ped Ships. Would I be correct in assuming that Ped Ships, like the Scottish Salmon Company, have pulled out of the Inverclyde City deal?
Mr. Phillipson.
Through you, Provost, yes, Ped Ships are no longer involved in the Inverclyde project. Unfortunately, they couldn't raise the capital to allow them to progress with their project, and the site is being actively marketed with interest from other parties.
Thanks, Mr Johnson. Councillor Allen?
That's right, thank you, Mr Jimison. Just that I done some notice there that there's two companies that have marketed the site there, that's JJL and Ryland. So yes, that answers my questions, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Ploskin and Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Provost. I just want, as this is the first time the council has met since the decision by Amazon, I just want to put on record my dismay at Amazon's decision, which was really a slap in the face for the workforce in Gurk, and obviously 70% of that 300 strong workforce comes from the Inverclyde area, so it's a bad decision for the entire area. And it's also, I think, a slap in the face to the Scottish taxpayer who footed the bill for a lot of the work that was done on that site when they first moved in. Both myself and one of my colleagues in the Scottish Parliament, Paul O'Kane, met with Amazon a few weeks ago and had a fairly robust meeting with them in which we posed a number of questions which we followed up in writing. To this day, we're still actually waiting for a response from them on a whole series of questions relating to not just the workers and the consultation process, but also the future of the site. So I was just wondering if Mr Jameson might be able to just provide a little bit more detail about how Amazon have been engaging with the subgroup of the task force, and whether you think that the engagement so far with the company has been meaningful, and what we might hope to see as a result of that at the end of the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ploskin. Mr Johnson, please.
Through you, Provost. The company have now engaged positively with the subgroup. There were problems at the beginning in terms of engagement. However, I would say that Amazon have fully engaged with the subgroup at this stage. In terms of what we're engaging with them on, it relates to, could we have saved the building? And the answer to that from Amazon is no. The second part is that in terms of support for the existing workforce, what can be done both from an Amazon perspective and also from a PACE and other partners perspective, that's got positive engagement. We've also highlighted concerns about the supply chain for Amazon, whether that be security, maintenance, or indeed catering, as well as the support that Amazon have provided the wider community with regards to some of their charitable donations. That's also been positive. And the final engagement that we've had with them relates to the use of the building and what options will be available for that. And again, we've had positive engagement with respect to that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Johnson. Councillor Reynolds and Councillor McKay.
I don't have a question, just a couple of comments. First of all, the jobs fair that hopefully will help people. Sorry, I turned it off too soon. I don't have any questions, just a couple of comments. First of all, in the jobs fair, which will hopefully help people into employment, whether it's at Amazon or in the town centre or both. And secondly, I have been at a couple of meetings with the landlords. The owners of the site are actively marketing the site, which I think is positive. They're excited about the prospects of the site. It's a unique site in Scotland. There's only two, and they say that the one in Gurk is in far better condition than the one in the East Coast. At this early stage, the options are many and varied, and therefore difficult to determine probable employment numbers for each of the options that are available. But hopefully we will hear more of that soon in the coming weeks, and well, hopefully not too long months. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Councillor McKay, please.
Yeah, it was just to build on Mr Jimison's response to Councillor McCluskey. I think it certainly was the case, and at the early days it was difficult to get any answers from Amazon, but the business secretary, Ivan McKee, was able to secure a meeting with an appropriate person on the operations side who was able to explain the rationale behind why they were consulting on the closure of the plant, and myself and the chief executive were invited to that meeting, and we were given a pretty extensive overview of the sort of process they went through to reach their conclusion, and they certainly did give a commitment to that meeting to engage with the task force, and certainly explore alternatives to closure as well. Obviously, the update provided by Mr. Jimison would suggest that they're no longer considering alternatives to closure, but certainly they were prepared to engage with the task force. So hopefully that will continue, and we'll try and get as best an outcome as we possibly can from this difficult situation.
Thank you, Councillor McCabe. Councillor Jackson, please.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. It's just on the Freeport bid, Provost. You know, I don't support the creation of Freeports. I don't believe it to create jobs. Evidence suggests that that's never been the case, that they actually take jobs away from certain areas. If I was silly enough to buy into the job creation scheme, can I ask Mr. Jimson, how is Inverclyde going to attract future investment, given the tax breaks and the implications of the East Coast now being the most attractive place to go in Scotland? How are we going to attract investment if there is going to be an investment?
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Mr. Jimison, please.
Through you, Provost. There were two components that would allow investment from the creation of green freeports. One was capital investment, because each green freeport received a total allocation of up to £25 million. And the second aspect was the retention of business rates to ensure that investment maintained within the freeport areas. Recognising that the freeport area that we bid for stretched from Greenock to Bells Hill, that was within a significant area of the metropolitan city region, and having the opportunity to have fiscal policy in respect of that would have resulted in investment. Councillor Jackson, unfortunately we were unsuccessful, so as I alluded to earlier, we're looking at a plan B as to how we can ensure that the metropolitan city region, and indeed Inverclyde, does benefit from any opportunities that prevail.
Councillor Jackson, you happy with that?
Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Jimson. Councillor McCabe, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, I was just going to come back in the Green Freeport bid, since I did attend a meeting of the Glasgow City Region Cabinet on the Council's behalf on Tuesday, where the Green Freeport bid was discussed, and the very concern that was raised there was about displacement. And Councillor Jackson has rightly had his own concerns, as have other members of the council, about green freeports and the potential impact it would have in displacement. But the reason that we bid for a green freeport was because we knew there was going to be two green freeports in Scotland, and rather have one of them in the west than not. And we have ended up in a situation where there's one not in the west and there's one in the east, and there is a very real fear that the east will benefit from a green freeport to the detriment of the west.
Thank you, Councillor McCabe. Mr. Jimson, do you want to add anything to that?
Through you, Provost. No, I've got nothing to add.
Thank you. Members, the recommendation is recommended the council notes the activity of the Inverclyde Task Force contained to support its purpose. Can we do that? Thank you. Item 7 on the agenda is a notice of motion. Inverclyde out of our services, a notice of motion by Councillor Maguire. Councillor Maguire, please.
Thank you, Provost. I'm not going to read the motion out loud. You will have a good copy of the online, so I'll try to add some flavour to it. So, colleagues, I bring this motion to vote on behalf of every citizen that we represent. In November 2019, Great Glasgow and Clyde was placed into special measures. In February 2020, a report on GP out of our service resilience was taken to the Greater Glasgow and Clyde Board. In this report, it outlined challenges within out of our services and proposed significant changes to service provision within Inverclyde. Namely, it outlined that Professor Sir Lewis Ritchie reviewed the GP out of hours provision in the summer of 2019, based against his own national review from 2015, and the words in the board report are, it became clear that strategic and operational issues within the service require immediate attention. This report was approved by the board and they entered into business continuity measures. That was before the pandemic. That was 3 years ago. For 3 years, our residents and loved ones have not had adequate access to GP out of hours care. For 3 years, I've heard stories of people not accessing care at the point of need. People told not to go to A&E, but rather to wait until morning. People told to travel from Group to Paisley in the middle of the night. This is not good enough, and Inverclyde deserves better. To date, there have been no plans to consult on a significant reduction in services. This was meant to be a temporary measure, but even as recently as the past couple of weekends, that provision has not been made in Inverclyde. Any changes to GP provision in this area should be part of a consultation. This has been essentially board-made decision made in private without public input. So I call upon this council to support this motion, to support democracy by having a fully consulted service redesign to allow local people to access care locally. And I'll ask my colleague, Councillor Clougherty, to second this motion.
Thank you, Councillor McGuire. Councillor Clougherty, please.
Thank you, Natasha. There's only one thing I would take issue with Natasha. The meeting of the 20th of February, I was 2020. I was actually an Inverclyde member on the Hill Board that day. There was one person who opposed the motion that day, and that was myself. And what I thought I would do is, rather than do my preamble and doing all my stuff, I thought what I would do is take the minutes of the meeting here, because it is important, because round about that time we actually had a meeting up at Folk Glasgow, and because of my membership of the board, I wasn't really allowed to say anything. But I think the minutes of the meeting speak for themselves, and I understand the position that Martin's in here and why he declared an interest early on. So, page 12 of the minutes actually states, Councillor Clougherty noted his disappointment in the recommendations made within the report. He highlighted the recent publication of the Scottish Index of Multi-Deprivation, which reported that Greenock Town Centre and East Inverclyde represented the most deprived areas in Scotland. He highlighted the travel issues and the proposals posed for residents of Inverclyde and the equity of access, which was not addressed within the paper. He was not in support of the proposals and felt that the recommendations did not take account the deprivation within the community, and it created inequality and inequity of access. Now that was my input into that meeting, and I think it is important because when I went to the actual vote itself, unfortunately I was the only one that was against it. Not any of my IJP colleagues from Inverclyde or not any of the other politicians within the room. Now, I think it's important that when you look at the minutes, and everybody's free to do so, we actually read further minutes. The person who was doing the redesign was a doctor in Ireland. I hope I pronounced that right. She recognised the points that I had made about the inequity of access. Furthermore, she stated it wasn't a long-term solution, and it was done to stabilise the service. She assured members that recommendations represented a temporary suspension of service and was not a permanent position. The actual recommendations itself say that they would do plans to provide a community service with an appraisal of the geographical spread of availability and the site accessibility of the service. Now that's key, because that's what we were actually saying. First of all, we were saying in that place was Inverclyde is cut off from Greater Glasgow, is cut off from the conurbation of Renfrewshire, and to put all the services within that area and virtually ignoring Inverclyde just flew in the face of what was reasonable to expect. And more important than that, it flew up in the face of equity of access to the people within Inverclyde, who are the lowest car ownership in Scotland, one of the lowest, and also were geographically bound by the motorway and the other geographical areas within the west of Scotland. So I recognise Sandra's amendment, but honestly, Sandra, I was opposed to it then. I don't have concerns. I'm opposed to what they're doing. And I think as a council and as citizens of Inverclyde, we should actually send out a clear message to say, no, really, you can't actually say in the papers that we believe in equality and we believe in equity, and then you're what you actually do does not support what you actually say. So I would hope that we can all support this, and I hope my SNP colleagues would support it as well. And I think it is a good motion, and it really does send a message to the Greater Glasgow and Clyde Health Board that we're not happy down another time. Thanks to my councillor for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Councillor Porty. Thank you, Councillor Maguire and Councillor Porty for presenting this notice of motion. We have a notice of amendment by Councillor Reynolds, and that has been distributed to members in the chamber in a hard copy and by email to members visiting online. Councillor Reynolds, would you like to present your notice of amendment? And it would be handy and I think helpful to the committee if you explain just the difference in this last paragraph that you wish to change.
Thank you, Provost. Can I start by saying that I think we as a group have agreed with lots of what you're saying, Jim and Natasha, and wouldn't go against, feeling that Inverclyde does deserve, special treatment, and I think special treatment is maybe partly what we're asking for. If you bear with me, I'd like to go through Natasha's preamble with my own, if you'll stick with this, because Jim, you have reached a blank wall with this, and I think it's helpful if we can find a way forward to improve things for the residents of Inverclyde regarding GP out of hours service in particular. I've done this by going through each of Natasha's paragraphs, so again, if you would bear with me, and some of it I'll be repeating what you've already said. Okay, so plans to reduce the GP out of hours service in Inverclyde. Sorry, my laptop has now decided to shut down. We're under review before the pandemic, as you said, and the pandemic forced the business continuity plans that were put in place in February 2020. During this month, there were lots of other service changes to GP practices due to COVID. I was working in GP practices during that time. In fact, it was so horrendous that I went up from 3 days to 1 week for 6 to 8 weeks and ended up doing it for a year. This included reduction in staff due to social distancing, illness, withdrawal of practice visited paramedics into the acute services, workload shifting to identifying and contacting vulnerable patients, home medication protocols for every care home residents, COPD medication. The list went on and on of all the extra work that was poured into GP practices at that time that was not their normal practice. This GP out of hours temporary measure was to be revisited after the pandemic restrictions eased. In fact, the reasons, as you stated, before the pandemic remain the same and have exacerbated due to continuing declining population and the availability of GPs to staff the service. You'll know that before the pandemic, quite often the out of hours service was cancelled because there was no GP. People would turn up and there would be nobody there. Which was part of the reason for the review. Inverclyde has 5.41% of the NHS GGC population. 1 in 10 patients who take up the offer of free patient transport are from Inverclyde. The Health Board is said to increase it out of hours in the next year would be desirable but difficult, despite wanting to return to full weekend cover and bank holiday cover from the current Saturday 8 to 2 AM and bank holiday cover that's in place now, and that would be desirable, which is why it's in my motion. GPs have been offered incentive but not taken up for a variety of reasons. Your next paragraph, my comments on that. Again, GP out of hours service remains in business continuity arrangements for obvious reasons. If you keep this and submit it, Natasha, I would suggest that you strike the statement about Greenwich Telegraph report and put in the official GGC report, as Jim has just explained to us. So GP out of hours service is a GP-led service, and a lot of people don't understand that. The health board doesn't have any control over that. They can't force GPs to work in and out of our service. It's part of their contract, and that is probably part of the problem, as well as GPs leaving early before retirement. I want to state that I fully recognise the public concern expressed in the petition is very, very real. And I'm sure that every one of us has felt frustration at some point when needing medical advice or help during out of hours, or know someone who has, whether they're family, friends or constituents. I could give half a dozen of my own experience in my family about that, so completely understand that frustration. On a personal note, I think because of my background, I probably manage that better than a lot of our constituents. Have an unfair advantage and know the system pretty well. And I think that's partly the problem. As a group, we want to see improvement in the GP out of our service. We're not against the improvement and pushing for improvement for Inverclyde, but we are committed to exploring any route that can make that happen. In the meantime, the advice in the Health Board website is clear, and if communicated in a different way, may aid decision making for the services and for the patients. I previously asked at a council meeting if any data, info, feedback, evidence available on how GP out of hours service is viewed in the rest of NHS GGC, and especially outlying areas such as Cathcart, Easterhouse, etc., because the GP services tend to be near or quite near the centre or near a couple of the A&E departments. Inverclyde is fortunate to have an A&E on our doorstep with an integrated minor injuries unit, and sometimes that's not quite understood as well. There is a minor injuries unit that can be accessed. Other areas have access to GP out of hours based at RAH, New Vic, Stog Hill and Vale and Leven. And normally, because we're in the Clyde area, Inverclyde residents in need of GP out of hours are directed to RAH or Vale and Leven. And I recognise that there are difficulties with both of these sites for a lot of our constituents. I agree a consultation should take place, but I feel it should be based on facts with a view to realistic solutions given the current circumstances, taking into account current shortage of GPs available to staff these services. It should also ensure that the public is fully informed of what and how services are available and how they are used, how they're best used. Therefore, I propose an amendment to Councillor Maguire's motion as follows, and you have it in front of me, Do you want me to read that out?
I think we've all got it.
Yeah.
So basically, my reason for doing this is not to create a stalemate, but to move forward and hopefully get to the point where all of us want to get to in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. A comment further. Do you have a seconder for your amendment?
Yeah, I'm seconding it, Provost.
Thank you, James. Councillor Paisley. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Paisley?
Yes, please.
Yes, there you go.
Thanks, Provost. I'm happy to second Councillor Reynolds' amendment. Not only does it give a more realistic approach, but it deals with the somewhat misleading premise of the original motion that a binary choice is available here. I think it requires a more detailed discussion. GPs across the whole of the UK, not just Scotland, feel that it's not worth the effort to do more hours due to their restrictive pension arrangements, which of course is a reserved power at Westminster. Along with the fact that Inverclyde's depopulation issue once again shows how widespread its negative effect is on our people, with us only having around 5% of the population of the Health Board area. Also, I'm quite disappointed to see that this motion does not adopt a Team Inverclyde approach by engaging our MSP to support this action, especially considering our earlier agenda item about the Inverclyde Task Force. Stuart McMillan has had meetings with the Health Board and has come out publicly in support of the return of our full-time GPs out of our service in Inverclyde, and his support should really be welcomed here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Daisley. Well, what I'm seeing in front of me here, Councillor Reynolds went through quite a comprehensive paragraph, but it's only the last paragraph that needs a chance to be changed as far as the motion. And there are subtle differences in it. And I think we're messing about playing words here. Maybe not, maybe not. Is there any other member wish to speak at this time? Councillor McVeigh.
Thank you, Provost. I think the reduction in the out-of-hour service, which is in the motion for Councillor Maguire, I think that's just symptomatic of what we've seen in Inverclyde over quite a few years now. We've seen an alternative unit go to Paisley, we've seen the paediatric unit go to Paisley, we're losing high dependency beds, there's other services going. And the latest we see from the Green Telegraph is that, which is an ongoing thing, is a lack of investment, lack of maintenance in the Inverclyde Royal. So I think absolutely we should oppose the health board plans. Absolutely. We, as elected members, are elected to do the very best for Inverclyde and the very best for the people in Inverclyde. So we should be campaigning for better health services, better out-of-hour services, more GPs, and all that goes along with it. So absolutely support Councillor McGrath's motion. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Councillor McVeigh. Councillor McCluskey, please.
Thank you, Provost. I'll speak first to the motion. Access to a GP, like all of us know, is probably one of the most basic NHS services that we can expect, and that should apply as much out of hours in the evenings, at night, at the weekends as it does during the day. And as Councillor Hopkins already said, Inverclyde is one of the most private communities in the west of Scotland with very low car usage. And while the health board suggests that transport can be offered to people in our area, that still means lengthy trips to and from hospitals in Glasgow and Paisley, often with a sick child or relative. But I don't want to rehearse what's in the motion, but what I wanted to do was maybe bring some of the concerns that have been raised with me by people, not just in my ward, but across Inverclyde in recent weeks. And I'll just highlight three of these. The first is two residents in Gourock who attended one of my surgeries recently, and they told me that they were sent to an out-of-hours GP in Paisley, even though the wife of the person who had come to the surgery was an experienced nurse, and she suspected that her husband had sepsis. And despite this, NHS 24 triaged them for out of hours. And so when they finally got to Paisley, because this wasn't one of the evenings that the service was running at Inverclyde, they were actually sent back to Inverclyde Royal as an urgent case to go to A&E. Another resident who is blind and has a guide dog contacted me raising concerns about transport to out of hours, fearing the kind of journeys that others would have to make, having just herself come through cancer treatment. This is what she wrote to me. For appointments I've attended the Queen Elizabeth, Stophill and Golden Jubilee using public transport each time, on occasions I've been unable to complete my journey due to feeling so unwell. There is a presumption that everyone has a car or can ask people to drive them. Inverclyde people are asked a lot by GG&C, and out of hours is yet another example. And then just this week, I contacted another resident whose granddaughter had needed to see a doctor last weekend, and this is what he said. Last Friday night, my granddaughter was up most of the night with earache, in pain and vomiting. She lives in Greenock, and my daughter was told it would be out of hours either Victoria Hospital in Shawlands or Stophill to see the out of hours GP. She took the appointment at Shawlands and put my granddaughter in the car. She had to turn around because my granddaughter was so ill and would be sick in the back of the car. Eventually, NHS 24 said she could take her to Inverclyde Royal, but why couldn't that have been done first? He finished by telling me, I want people to know about this, not just because of my granddaughter, but because I don't want this happening to any other child in Inverclyde. And we know these stories are just the tip of the iceberg, and it's no surprise that we have over 6,000 people who have signed a petition, not just raising concerns, but calling for the out-of-hour service to be reinstated in full. And I would ask that if this motion passes, that the Leader of the Council ensures that the depth of feeling in the community is communicated to senior executives in the health board. And just turning to some of the points that Councillor Reynolds and Councillor Daisley raised, I don't agree that the health board has no control over the service. Yes, it's GP-led, and it is led by the availability of GPs, but the health board has control over how they pay people, has control over the conditions And that can be seen in the way that the Vale of Leven service operates, which operates in a different way to the rest of the service across the west of Scotland. So Councillor Reynolds herself used the expression that we're looking for something special in Inverclyde. We've actually got an example of a special service running already in another part of the area, and what I would suggest is that we look at that for Inverclyde as well. And I was also surprised to hear from Councillor Daisley that the future of out-of-hours is somehow Westminster's fault, it seems, and not actually the responsibility of either the Health Board or the Scottish Government. And if the problem is to do with funding, then we as a council and the Health Board itself need to make the case to the Health Secretary that this is a lifeline service that can't be lost and needs additional funding. And the final thing I'll say is this, and these are points that I've made directly to the Health Board during meetings as well, that trust in the Health Board has been low in Inverclyde for a long time. There's no point pretending anything else. And we've heard already from Councillor Clockersy what was in those minutes from February 2020. And what I'll be saying now, what I'll be saying when it comes to it in terms of any discussion in the future at the Health Board is, what would a breach of trust look like? What would a breach of trust like this mean if the Health Board goes back on its word in terms of reinstating the service, which we were told were going to be returned? So I would just urge members to support Councillor Maguire's motion, and unfortunately I would urge them to reject the amendment in Councillor Reynolds' name, because we have had concerns about the service for 3 years. We have had concerns about where this may lead, and what I would say is, if this isn't the time to oppose service changes, I don't really know when we would do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCluskey. Councillor Robertson, please.
Thank you, Provost. I'm going to take a few moments to urge everybody to look at the issue in the round and actually not see our amendment as an adversarial amendment, but rather a helpful amendment to try and fully achieve what I think everyone in the room wants to achieve in terms of this particular service. I think what we want to do with our amendment is to ensure the widest possible communication, to articulate the concerns as wide as we possibly can, as articulated in Councillor Reynolds and Councillor Daisley's last paragraph, including that articulation of a special case. If a Vale of Leven has been able to fully endorse a service and bring a service forward that is different from the others, then yes, we should be able to do that if it's the right thing for us to do, but we need to articulate what that is. And so the wider communication of being able to do that, which is perhaps not been articulated fully previously, would be a useful thing to do. We fully endorse the suggestion of public consultation. That is not something that we want to take out of this at all. This is something that we are fully behind. We think there should be a public consultation, but there should also be immediate action. And the proposed amendment, we hope, is just taking that action further. We're not just here to oppose the things that we think are wrong. We're here to try and make things better where we can. And the immediate action of being able to request the immediate reintroduction of weekending and bank holiday cover would be a step in the direction of bringing back a service and not seeing that complete diminution that's never going to return back to us, but actually see the step in the other direction. So I'm urging colleagues across the chamber to see our amendment not as an adversarial one, but something that takes things forward and actually helps us to achieve what we're trying to do for us.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Daisley is asked to speak again. Councillor Daisley, you have already spoken with seconding the amendment. I'm willing to grant you further speech if it's by means of explanation for some point that's been made.
Thanks, Provost. Yes, it's just a point of clarity for what I'd said earlier that Councillor McCluskey had picked up on. The power that was reserved to Westminster specifically was occupational pensions.
Thank you, Councillor Daisley. Councillor Moran.
Aye, thank you, Provost. Provost, like yourself, I had the great privilege of sitting in that chair with that chain around my neck. And I was acutely aware that when I was sitting there, I was representing everyone in Inverclyde, everyone's point of views, and representing and advocating them. And I always thought that was a great privilege. Going forward, on the point that Councillor Newman, can I have to say, I've utmost respect for Councillor Reynolds, because like her, I too was on the front line during the pandemic, and I know how hard it was. But the same token, Provost, I've got an email from my GP again to Monday saying, don't contact them because they're on sick. That's the third one since January, I think. But during the first time we got one, we were told, and don't go to Inverclyde Council, actually else, because they can't go either. So if someone's sick or ill, where do they go? Please tell me. NHS 24, never tried it. It is an absolute minefield to get through there. It takes forever. And if you've got a sick child or anyone's sick, it makes the situation 100 times worse. Paul, promise. I've been down here quite a while, and this is probably the most consensus council I've ever sat on. Because we are Team Inverclyde. And I would ask my colleagues to think about the amendment. Is it really that important to not get this go through as is laid down with Jim and Natasha, united, and send the right message to people? This isn't attacking the Scottish Government or Scottish Parliament or even the Health Board. It's just saying to people who run this Health Board, we're not asking for any favours here in Inverclyde. All we're asking for is to be given the same treatment as they get everyone else within the Greater Glasgow and Health Board. I could go on all day with Sloan or Martin has already spoken. I'm not going to be down that one. I'll just say, as Team Inverclyde, let's get behind this and send a message to them that we are not prepared to sit back anymore and be given a lesser service than the rest of our people within the Greater Glasgow Board enjoy, promise.
Thank you, Councillor Moran. Is there any other member wishing to make a contribution? Then I will go back to Councillor Maguire to sum up.
Thank you, Provost. Please forgive me, I'm trying to keep my very scattered because there's lots of points made there by my colleagues. So, first of all, I want to say that I think everything that I've said in here today has came from a place of wanting to do better for our constituents and for our people. And I can't imagine what it was like working in care throughout the pandemic because I had a totally different role during that time. It's not special treatment that we're asking for Inverclyde, we're asking for fair treatment for people to say, I am sick, I don't need to work in the hospital with my sickness, but I need treatment and I need it now. It's what people in our area need, and primary care should be accessible locally, not through travelling through various local authority areas to get to it. I agree with Councillor Reynolds wholeheartedly that COVID impact services issues were there before COVID, though, as was mentioned earlier, and it empathise with this. However, we need improvement. The report that was taken to Greater Glasgow and Clyde's Health Board was saying improvements were needed. I would love to see, and I think this is well up where I've spoken, that's why in this motion, I would love to see a vote of GP. I have better access to my bank and telecoms than I do my GP, same with our constituents too. It said that a third of GPs in the report, it said a third are eligible to be on the rota, and it was a pension issue that came up. But once again, that's a whole different kettle of fish that we can't deal with locally here. I don't agree that my motion is binary. I know it might seem like you either support it or you don't, and I suppose today in the vote, you do support it or you don't. However, the Team Inverclyde report that was being sought there, our MSP can't come in here and vote with us, and he has been advocating the service in the ways that I mentioned earlier, and this does not supersede or preclude him from any discussions at all. We want to work with all our MSPs and with our MP for the area as well. Unfortunately, though, I don't see the amendments being helpful to what we want to achieve for our constituents here. I think once again it agrees wholeheartedly with what's been said in this, with the exception of we oppose what's happening as rather than being concerned about it. However, within that Greater Glasgow and Clyde Board minutes, it said that we would get Saturday and bank holiday cover, so the amendment goes further by a day, by a Sunday, and I would like to see out of hours extended throughout the week here the way that it used to be, because I do think that this is a service failure, and I think that ultimately we have constituents every single day that are suffering as a result of this. We have things going undiagnosed and untreated that is hampering our constituents' children, it's hampering people being able to get to work, it's hampering businesses from being able to run fully. So as with a bit of sadness that I can't support the amendment. I can't accept as part of this, as part of my motion. But I really do thank everybody in this chamber for the heart that's been behind us today, because it's not meant to be adversarial at all. It's just about doing what's best for the people of Inverclyde. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Maguire. Thank you, members, for a very impassioned debate about the out of hours service. We have the motion and we have an amendment. Councillor Reynolds, before we pass it to Mr. Strachan, is it still your wish that the amendment goes forward? Yes. Mr. Strachan.
Okay, thank you, Provost. Thank you, Councillor. So we have the motion from Councillor Maguire, seconded by Councillor Clockerty, and the amendment by Councillor Reynolds, seconded by Councillor Daisy. So I'm going to ask you to indicate your vote for the motion or the amendment or not voting. Councillor Brennan.
Motion.
Councillor Brooks.
Motion.
Councillor Cassidy.
Motion.
Councillor Clockerty. Motion. Councillor Crowther.
Amendment.
Councillor Curley.
Amendment.
Councillor Daisley.
Amendment.
Councillor Jackson.
Motion.
Councillor Law.
Amendment.
Amendment. Thank you, sorry. Councillor McKee.
Motion.
Councillor McCluskey.
Motion.
Councillor McCormick.
Motion.
Councillor Maguire.
Motion.
Provost Mackenzie.
Motion.
Councillor McVeigh.
Motion.
Councillor Moran.
Motion.
Councillor Quinn.
Motion.
Councillor Reynolds.
Amendment.
Councillor Robertson.
Amendment.
Councillor Wilson.
Motion.
So the motion is carried by 14 votes to 6.
Thank you, members. Next. Item 8. Item 8 of the agenda, page 43. The strikes minimum service level bill. It's a notice of motion by Councillor Jackson. Councillor Jackson, please.
Thank you, Provost. The SNIGS minimum service levels bill should have become law in its current form is ultimately designed to give employers in vital sectors the power to sack frontline workers who take strike action. Denying workers what is universally regarded as a fundamental human right, the right to withdraw their labour. The UK government are trying to change the law to authorise employers to do what no court in this country can do, to compel an employee to do any work or attend a place of work identified as a vital service by the government. The bill provides statutory provision enabling employers to requisition workers. A worker who refuses to comply will lose automatic unfair dismissal protection if they are sacked. The suggestion by the government is that lives are being put at risk by striking workers. This is nonsense. There is already a minimum service level of life and limb provision in most major industries during strike action. Agreements drawn up through negotiations with trade unions, frontline workers and managers who have a detailed understanding of the day-to-day operational needs of their services, not by politicians. The real purpose of this new legislation is to weaken the power of workers and trade unions and increase the power of employers. In the absence of an effective right to strike, pay terms and conditions will be set by employers. We just have to look at Amazon to see what happens to workers with no trade union recognition or collective bargaining. So the motion calls that Inverclyde Council, as an employer, brought in accordance with the law, continue to respect the human rights of all workers to take strike action and support their right to do so. The Inverclyde Council strongly objects to the strikes minimum service levels bill, will seek to undermine the rights of workers and trade unions, and agrees that the Chief Executive Officer write to the Prime Minister and the Secretary of State for Business and Energy and Industrial Strategy, calling on them to withdraw the bill. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Clark, please.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. And I promise I wouldn't take as long in second this one. I mean, Councillor Jackson has said all, because we know what this is. This is an attack on workers' rights. Very simple. It's an attack by a Conservative government on workers' rights within the UK. Everybody's got the right to withdraw their labour. There's two bits of advice my dad always gives me, and I've held by those two bits. One was never by the sun, and another one was never possibly the wind. I think if you adhere to those two, you will not go far wrong. But I think what this does and what our motion does is succinctly it says what we can do as a council. So as a council, this allows us to say what we think as a council. I've read James's amendment. I think that's a whole different argument, to tell you the truth, and I'll wait for Colin summing up. I just think that's a whole different argument, and it's a whole different debate than what this debate here is, and I'll be interested in what James actually thinks of that. But for me, this is quite clear. This is an attack by the UK Conservative government, an attack on workers' rights that we've seen many, many times before. Now, okay, my party this time is say it will reverse them if they get in power. However, it should be seen for what it is. If it smells like an attack on workers' rights, it is an attack on workers' rights. And I'm glad to second Councillor Amber's motion.
Thank you, Councillor Coffey. We have a notice of amendment that has been issued, both in hard copy within the chamber here and by email. It's a notice of amendment by Councillor Beasley. Councillor Beasley, please.
Thanks, Provost. In 2015, when the Smith Commission debated the devolving of further powers to the Scottish Parliament, the subject of employment law being devolved was proposed, to which it's widely reported that Scottish Labour simply said no, backing the Tories and ensuring workers' rights remained at Westminster. This was in direct contradiction to the STUC, who announced their support of devolving employment law to Holyrood. This was due to their belief that the Scottish Parliament was more favourable of workers' rights. Scottish Labour, however, decided to align with the TUC and the UK Labour Party rather than show their support for Scottish workers' rights. The Labour Party that once was, to me, does not exist anymore. Instead of joining workers in protests, they sacked their shadow ministers for joining picket lines. Instead of being for the many, they now support the few who benefit from Brexit by adopting a policy of not rejoining the EU. Instead of being in opposition to the Tories, they join forces with them, vote alongside them, and even team up with them to oppose the Scottish people's right to democracy, led by their pro-Brexit anti-democracy leader in Westminster. Of course, I believe that Scotland's people would be best protected by the full powers of being an independent nation, but today I'm calling upon my Labour colleagues in Inverclyde to truly show their support of Scottish workers and include the amendment that Inverclyde Council recognises the position of the STUC that employment and trade union law should be devolved to the Scottish Parliament so that Inverclyde's workers' rights are more effectively protected in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Beasley. And we just make this clear. You agree with the motion that's put forward and you wish that additional paragraph be put in to add it to the motion. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you, Councillor Beasley. We have a second for Councillor Beasley's motion. Councillor Prowett, please.
It's not working enough to.
Should be fine.
Yes,
Just carry on, okay. I'll try to speak a wee bit louder then. Basically, wait, that's a working now, that's all, thank you. While I thank Councillor Jackson for bringing this motion forward, I'm happy to second Councillor Daisley's amendment, which highlights the feelings of the Scottish Labour Party in their response to the Smith Commission. In other words, its statement of intent as submitted by Johan Lamont to Lord Smith. What we are aware of is that the Scottish Labour Party spent 2 years looking at the issue of further powers, but they consulted widely during this process and further stated that they would work together with the parties involved in the Commission to come to a conclusion that will provide the best future for the people of Scotland. Whilst this statement is commendable, the Scottish Labour Devolution Committee which included Duncan McNeill, MSP, and the then Deputy Leader of the Scottish Labour Party, Anas Sarwar MP, who they penned their submission titled Powers for a Purpose, Strengthening Accountability and Empowering People. Unfortunately, it went on to state it is critical that certain care matters remain reserved with the UK Parliament. Those which are not should be devolved to the Scottish Parliament. Essential reserved matters include employment law. The inclusion of the reserved employment law in Labour's response clearly highlights what Councillor Daisley's amendment is unambiguously stating, and that is the position of the STUC that employment and trade union laws should be devolved to the Scottish Parliament so that the Scottish workers' rights are more effectively protected in the future. Now, that also means to say that the submission by the STUC to the Smith Commission proposals by Dave Moxham, who was the STUC Deputy General Secretary, and summing up very, very simply, he states our employment law, minimum wages and equality legislation, our position is straightforward. It is now time for Scotland to enjoy the same devolved powers as Northern Ireland. I would ask members to support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crowther. Councillor Wilson, please.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. I have sat in this chamber for 15 years, and I've looked in that 15 years at the Labour benches and wondered when there's going to be some socialism. And today I congratulate you, Councillor Jackson, because today I'm hearing some socialism. And I compliment you for it. I disagree with what you put forward, because as somebody who worked and lived in England during Margaret Thatcher's reign, I supported what she did with regard to unions who were getting out of control, not just in England, but all over the UK, and she was able to move things forward. So with regard to the Strikes Minimum Service Bill and your opposition to it, Councillor Jackson, I'd like to ask Mr. Strachan for clarification. With regards to point number 2, can we ask the Chief Executive to write to the Prime Minister? Is that within our power?
Well, I mean, the Council can't control what Westminster does, but the Council can write a letter to the Prime Minister, and that happens a fair amount across authorities. I've spoken with the Chief Executive about it, yes.
Thank you very much. That's excellent clarification. When we look at democracy, and this is really what this is about, I was interested in the Mr. Starmer's decision not to allow Jeremy Corbyn to stand at the next election, which for somebody who's been a former leader of the Labour group and the Labour Party in Westminster is a bit of an insult. And Jeremy Corbyn said, Sir Keir Starmer banning him from standing as a Labour candidate at the next general election is a flagrant attack on democracy. So I think we need to be a bit careful here when we are talking about what the Conservatives are trying to do in Westminster and what Keir Starmer is doing himself. Provost, I shall sit down at that and leave the motion to the full council to my young colleague, Councillor Brooks. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I'll take Councillor McCabe next, and then Councillor Law.
Thanks, Provost. I don't really know what Councillor Wilson was on about there, to be honest. Completely irrelevant to the motion before us. I was wondering, I have to say, whether I was going to support the amendment from Councillor Daisley, but after that nationalist rant, I'm certainly not going to be supporting this amendment. There's a bit of a pattern, I have to say, in this council, Provost, that the Labour group brings forward motions and the SNP group seeks to amend them rather than bringing forward their own motions. I mean, if Councillor Daisley really truly wanted the council to agree to his amendment today, he could brought it forward as a separate motion, but he just wanted to have a wee go at the Labour Party, to be perfectly honest. But that's fine. That's politics. Now, I happen to think the best way to protect workers' rights in this country is for the election of a majority Labour government in the next UK election in 24 or 25, whenever that will be. And that will certainly be a better way of improving workers' rights. I'm absolutely open for a debate on what further powers are devolved to the Scottish Parliament, and employment rights may well be one of those. And I'm sure our party will take a view in that in the run up to the election, and we're certainly supportive of further devolution. But I have to say, the Scottish Parliament hasn't done very well in protecting the rights of local government in Scotland over the last 15 years, and particularly I have to say during the last 8 years under the First Ministership of Nicola Sturgeon. They have systematically undermined local government in Scotland. They've broken the system of local government finance. They've transferred police services to a national police service, fire services to a national police service. They're trying to transfer care services to a national care service. And if they could get away with it, they would be transferring education to a national care service. So if anybody's looking about protecting rights under the Scottish Parliament, they certainly shouldn't be turning to the SNP. And if the Scottish Parliament had rights over employment law, I wouldn't guarantee that an SNP-led government would be at the front vanguard of protecting workers' rights in Scotland. So I certainly won't be supporting the amendment. And I know that SNP colleagues might be hurting today because of the announced departure of the First Minister yesterday. I happen to think it's the best thing that's happened to Scotland in the last 15 years, and hopefully we can move beyond the disrupting and the poisonous debate that we've had for the last 6 years or so, and focus on real issues that impact in real communities, and try and work together and build a consensus going forward.
Thank you, Councillor McCabe. Councillor Law, please.
Thank you, Provost. I hope everyone can hear me well. Right, my signal's not great today. I just wanted to say, well, I thoroughly support Councillor Jackson's motion today. I wanted to give my endorsement also for the amendment presented by Councillor Daisley. The past few years in UK politics has given us the context for which this debate is happening today. The part of the motion that stuck out to me was in accordance with the law. The problem for me here is what law? The UK government shows a disregard for the law when it suits them, or seeks to use it to their advantage to legally erode our rights at other times. The strikes bill, if or when it is given assent, will be law. Councillor Jackson highlighted the international legal obligations of our Westminster government, but they have shown in the recent past they are willing to ignore these obligations. Like with the, to quote, specific and limited way they would break international law with the now Internal Market Act. The undermining of devolution by legislating in areas that are within the competence of the Scottish Government, the illegal proroguing of Parliament to try and force through the most damaging version of Brexit possible, and then subsequently, unforgivably in my view, taking away our rights as European citizens. Not to mention their desire to take us out of the European Court of Human Rights, which will threaten our rights in ways far exceeding just our employment. They've shown us time and time again they have not to be trusted with either the law or our rights. That's why it's important for us today to show we can and will work together to oppose them at every juncture. It's for this reason I support what Councillor Jackson has put forward today, whilst agreeing with the view of the STUC and the amendment by Councillor Daisley. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Law. I'll take Councillor McCluskey and Councillor Brennan. Councillor Brennan.
Thanks very much, Provost. I had my light on it right at the beginning. A long time before it all took this direction, because I'm going to just start by doing a quick check that I am actually in the Inverclyde Council chambers. I'm not at Westminster, I'm not at the European Union, I'm not sitting in the Holyrood at Scottish Government, because we've had so many mentions of them today that now I'm getting a wee bit confused with what we're actually here to do as councillors. We are the council, and I think sometimes there is a risk in bringing these motions that can seem at first glance like they're away from our scope, but as councillors we have a voice on the pressing issues of the day. I was actually going to round up by saying that the historical links between the Labour Party and the trade unions are not up for debate, and that it took Labour elected members to bring this motion. Then I thought that was a bit mean to my SNP colleagues, but that ship has long since sailed. In this discussion, I'm sure Councillor Crowther will appreciate a water-based analogy there as I brought that in. So it's a shocking sign of the times that it seems preferable to UK government that a law taking away the right to withdraw labour is seen as preferable to governments actually tackling the cost of living crisis and ensuring that workers receive a wage worthy of their service. Now, we mentioned at the start we're going to declare trade union membership as a matter of course. I'm a proud member of Unison, a proud member of EIS, as well as having decades of experience as a frontline worker in the public sector. And I'm not sure if any other elected members here today are currently part of a striking workforce like myself. Now, like me, the majority of trade union members are actually women. 56.8% of trade union members are women, despite women making up about 49.8% of the workforce. And I'll allow you to draw your own conclusions about why more women than men feel the need to join a union to protect their rights. I work with a lot of these women who are trade union members, you know, a lot of them carrying responsibilities for young children and older adults, possibly working two jobs, possibly working in the front line, and that's why I really respected what Councillor Reynolds said in the past debate, because I think that can give you an insight into some of the issues. Now, these women are so busy with all the things that they're balancing and juggling, that they don't have time often to stand for elected office, they don't have time to be a trade union office bearer, they don't have time to grandstand. That falls a wee bit short of their diary commitments. That's why I'm glad to be a woman joining in this debate, and I think Councillor Lowe got in before me online. So I just want to say, for all sorts of reasons and those that I've mentioned, I fully support the motion brought by Councillor Jackson. I'd also like to add a note of thanks to the Inverclyde trade union branches and, slightly controversially, the council officers. It would be wrong and unfair, I think, to both those groups to say that they work cohesively and well together, because I don't think that's really either of their roles, but I think they challenge when needed, they grease the wheels and crunch the gears together, as one local trade union steward might have told me, always trying to get the best terms and conditions for local workers, and I think they deserve a lot of credit for that, because behind the placards, the noise, there's a lot of hard graft that goes into that, and I think we don't always see it, but it's real people here making Inverclyde Council a decent employer, and trade unions trying to get the very best for their members, and that's me trying to bring it back to a local perspective, which I hope you might appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brennan. Councillor Heston.
Thank you, Provost. The right to strike in this country has been hard won. And it's not actually a right. Like, we don't actually have the right to strike in this country. What we've got is a series of legal immunities that stop people from being prosecuted when they're striking. And it's the last resort of workers who have exhausted every other channel to try and get a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. And you would think that in the face of the biggest number of strikes in a generation, that the Conservative government would maybe ask themselves why people are willing to forego pay to protest about their conditions. But instead, what we've ended up with are striking workers painted as gullible because they are apparently listening to trade union barons. And then we've had this bill, which is basically the Conservatives lashing out at those asking for, in a lot of cases, a modest pay rise given inflation. And I think it's worthwhile thinking about who this bill targets. So the same nurses that we went out and clapped during COVID are now threatened with sack for protesting their conditions. Fire and rescue staff, like Barry Martin, who Councillor Wilson mentioned at the start of this meeting, who tragically lost his life fighting the Jenner's fire in Edinburgh last month. So often these workers that we're talking about would be affected by these bill are people that are putting themselves at risk and are now being cruelly targeted. And we shouldn't forget, this isn't the first time that the Conservative government have tried to introduce legislation like this. I had to look back to see how many times they tried to do this and abandoned it. So in 1981, Margaret Thatcher attempted it and abandoned it because it wasn't going to work. In 1996, at the fag end of another Tory government, John Major tried the same, and at that time he was opposed by even the CBI and the Institute of Directors, said it was unworkable. And then the 1997 Conservative Manifesto doubled down and tried to suggest removing legal immunity from strikes that were judged to be, in their language, disproportionate or excessive. And I don't think I need to remind Conservative members about how the public responded to the 1997 Tory manifesto.
Remind me.
But this proposed law hasn't just met opposition from trade unions in my own party. It's been rubbished by employment lawyers across the board who said it's likely to be successfully challenged in the courts, and that's if it even manages to get itself through the House of Lords, which is in doubt at the moment. So if there's any silver lining to this piece of legislation, it is probably that the government's decision to dust off the policies of the 1997 manifesto probably suggests that this is the last gasp of a Conservative government that's run out of ideas, and I'm pleased that we have committed to repealing it if we do form the next government. And just to turn to the amendment from Councillor Daisley, I've just got a couple of things to say on this. Firstly, I'm open-minded when it comes to the devolution of employment law, but I don't think a fairly straightforward motion opposing an awful piece of legislation is the place to open up a constitutional debate in the way that this has. But I just want to reflect on what we've heard from the SNP members proposing the amendment, which is you hear a lot about devolution of powers, you hear a lot about what powers the Scottish Parliament should have, you hear little about how the government would use them. So what would the government's policy, a Scottish government with these powers, what would their policy be on strikes? How do we know it's going to be progressive? Like what indication is there that that would actually happen? And the other point I would make is, even when we do devolve powers to the Scottish Parliament, how long does it actually take for them to use them? Let's take two examples. Welfare powers were devolved in the Smith Commission, still haven't been taken on by the Scottish Government. We were told last week it would be 2026 before we might see that. For the time in between, we're going to see more Tory welfare policies imposed because the Scottish Government haven't actually taken those powers on. The devolution of employment tribunals. So in this same area, the Smith Commission devolved employment tribunals to the Scottish Parliament. We're told at the earliest it's going to be 2024 before we're going to see that done. Just as a reminder, Councillor Daisley said the Smith Commission was in 2014 and 2015. And you know, it's so I think we need to be thinking more about how we use these powers rather than calls for them to be devolved to what? To a government that you know, we don't even know who the leader of it is going to be in 6 or 8 weeks' time. So I support fully Councillor Jackson's motion and hope that other members support it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCluskey. Councillor Brooks and Councillor Maguire.
Thanks very much, Provost. It's wonderful listening to other people telling us what the actual bill before Parliament is about. It's a wonderful time. But Provost, as promised in 2019 manifesto, remember that one? I don't think we have to remind them of that one. The government has introduced this bill to ensure that we have vital public services. And it's really interesting to know the commentary that's coming from the benches about what this bill is about and what it's not about. So broadly, it follows the list of the 2016 Trade Union Act that they will have a basic function of delivery to ensure that there will be a basic level of service for those organisations within the Trade Union Act of 2016. And as already been said, there currently is a voluntary level of agreement, and that is voluntary, which means sometimes it doesn't happen. That's what voluntary means. Now, are we an outlier? How far are we outlying from others? Other countries across Europe and wider across the world have these laws in place. These countries include Spain, Italy and France. They've got statutory minimum service levels in place, and that is what this bill chooses to put in place. Also the Netherlands, that outlier, Germany, Spain and France, they all have a balance, the right to strike and ensuring that we have continued good public services during those strikes. So it's not barring strikes, it's during the strikes, and that's a key word, during the strikes. So this legislation will ensure that specific services cannot shut down completely when workers strike in order to maintain critical and in many cases life-saving services. So these are life-saving services that could be withdrawn if the voluntary agreement is not upheld. Life-saving services. Provost, I understand Councillor Jackson and Councillor Doherty desire to protect the trade unions. We've heard a lot about trade union rights, but my desire, as Councillor Brennan would suggest, is for the citizens here of Inverclyde. You know, this is a UK Parliament bill that will affect the citizens here in Inverclyde. So let me list very shortly and very briefly the specific services that this bill would affect. It would affect the health service. It would affect the nursing we clap for. It would affect the minimum level of service that is required within the health board, nursing and other professions, obviously, within the health board. Fire and rescue service, education services, transport services, the decommissioning of nuclear installations, the management of radioactive waste and spent fuel, and finally, the border security. A minimum level of service to protect our borders. So that's what you're going to vote against. That's interesting. That's what you're going to vote against. When this bill passes through Parliament, the government will also consult on the level of coverage required for the ambulance, the fire and the rail service that should be guaranteed during the strike. So there is a process of negotiation going on during this passage of the bill going through, and you quite rightly said it's currently going through the first house and it's with the upper house at the moment. If the employer and trade union in question is unable to reach agreement on the minimum level of service, not cancelling the strike, the minimum level of service, an independent central arbitration committee will decide on the minimum level of service. So not politicians, I think some computer says politicians would make the decision on what the minimum level of service is. That's not the case. That's not what the bill before the House has at the moment. As to improve the legislation, it is important to note that this legislation is designed to deliver improvements in the medium to long term rather than to deal with industrial action that's currently gripping the nation. And that's your point, sir. We have obviously major challenges, and that's what this bill's about, that's not the motion that Colin brought forth about. But this bill's in Parliament is not trying to challenge the issues that we have just now. Moreover, this legislation is designed to improve services for our citizens, as the strike days will not itself be prevented. Strike days will not be prevented. It's to protect the level of service during a strike day. The government has made it clear that it always defends the right of the worker to strike. I was waiting for a fast comment there, but promised I'm not behaving myself. It has to prevent the strike. However, it must balance freedom with public rights and the civic criteria it must meet to ensure that we have life-saving public services. Therefore, the legislation comes alongside an open and honest discussion between unions as to what is fair and what is affordable, ensuring a basic level of service across these six key sectors, while working with unions to protect the public while defending the right to strike. So, Provost, agenda item 8 asks us to consider the motion. You have noted I have considered the motion, and I move an amendment that would take no action. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. We've got a second for that.
I'm happy to second that motion, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Maguire and then Councillor Cummins.
Thank you very much. Sorry, there's been sort of discussion today, but it's good. So I'm not going to delve into what has and hasn't been delivered as part of the 2014 Swift Commission. My colleague kind of hinted on that a lot more earlier on. And today we've talked about a lot of politics of an opposing party, but that's not about the issue that's here today. We're not talking about Brexit. We're not talking about what is devolved or isn't devolved. The issue at hand is protecting our workforce. We're looking to ensure that people do not lose the right to protest wholeheartedly, to say that the workplace is neglecting their duties or say that they are worth more. The bill Westminster has put forward is not to ensure life and limb covered, but it's to stop any disruption that tried to cause from my perception of it. I understand what my colleague Councillor Brooks said about it being for 6 sectors only, but in France One of the sectors is transportation, and all these do is get 48 hours notice. We need to get 2 weeks notice to strike here. So I think that fair supersedes what other countries are doing. Since 2016, we've seen more and more pressure and more liability put upon trade unions just to have our basic right to strike. Now we need to do a written paper ballot. We're trying to get away from using paper. We're trying to get people more engaged online. Yet one of the most common democratic rights being to vote in your trade union is being made to be done by pigeon post. And that isn't even reliable at the moment because of strikes, which is further impacts other people's rights to strike. And then on top of that, you need to then get a 50% turnout of all your members. This new legislation has only come around because people have had enough. They've had enough of increasing workloads and pay not increasing at below inflation rates. It's no surprise that so many people around the country over the past couple of months have been out on picket lines, whether that's virtual or physical. I have striked once because my union has only called one strike day for me. But there's been people that have been striking for days upon days. We have it across our university sector, we have it across our schools. And we're only going to see this increase as people are discontented with their conditions and their rights. We must come together for workers. We must come together and support our trade unions in this. We cannot let our workers lose their essential rights. I firmly support the human rights that have been laid out in here. I think it was Council Law that had said around people wanting us to come out of the European Court of Human Rights. That is a dangerous, dangerous thing that we're looking at. We cannot back down on this. And the ultimate thing around this motion is that we want to see our workers supported. We want to make sure that life and limb cover is there, but that's already got necessarily. I don't think we need to go any further than this. I think this is a way of oppressing workers to ensure that work is maintained at a level so that it's almost as if a strike is not happening. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Maguire. Councillor Curry, please.
Thank you. I think some of the points I was going to make have already been made by other members in this chamber. I think it's important to make the point that we've got what we need to do immediately, which is why we agree with the motion, but also try to set changes in motion to actually get as much as we can the rules and responsibilities within the segment. In fact, we can make decisions in Scotland for people in Scotland. I want to direct most of my comments towards the Conservative no motion. No, sorry, what was that again? No action. No action. Aye. It's an interesting terminology where you're taking no action because of the action your government is taking down south. But I think it's important that we actually say that it's important to put decisions in the hands of the people. And take the point that the Labour colleagues are making, that they're hoping that this can be solved by our general elections in the UK and the Labour Party will get power, maybe with support the SNP, though that might not be something they want to get. But we have to look at what we actually do, what will happen, why do we not look at the powers here? I think there are two words in this situation. I don't believe we as an organisation should take no action on this. I think it's important that we do take action. As a group, we agree with the short term, let's get the ripping back. So agree wholeheartedly with what they call Councillor Jackson's motion, but I think it's important we also think more long term and medium term what we can get, what we can do in Scotland to ensure that we write a Bill of Rights that guarantees workers' rights, guarantees the right to strike, not just the right not to be able to call to have not have a criminality, not be put in jail, but actually guarantee the right to strike. This is things we could do if we had the power to do it. And I think we need to say, well, how can we agree to it? And if we get these powers to Scottish Parliament, I presume that our Labour colleagues will make these sort of amendments as proper socialists that they are, as what they call David Dobson has admitted today. And it's good to see that Colin Jackson has brought this motion today, because I think it's raised a debate, and it's good that we have a debate about these things and how they affect people in Inverclyde, because as Councillor Brooks have said, this will affect the people in Inverclyde, it will affect our people who provide the training service, it will affect the nurses, and it will affect people who provide services who will lose the right to strike, lose to make their demands known, and what is a right that we should all have to withdraw labour. Because at the end of the day, that's what we should all be able to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. Before I go to Councillor Jackson to sum up, is there any other member wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Maybe if it's okay with yourself, in summary, I'll maybe address some of the points, if that's okay. Just on the first point, just towards the Conservative police over here, as I said previously, I remember long ago, and I not so much to make believe, but there was actually Conservatives and Unionist governments who seen the benefits of collective bargaining. In fact, Ted Heath was one of those who would work with the unions because he understood an educated and a healthy workforce were conducive to a good economy. So just to address that point, and also on Mr. Starmer, I don't want to play politics here, but you know, the Labour Party had plenty of time to overturn some of the Conservative anti-trade union laws, and they didn't. So with Mr. Starmer banning his MPs from joining, picket lines, that again, you know, I want to avoid the politics here. Just on the SNP have taken the approach to attack the Labour Party on this, and as I think it was Francesca reminded us, the Labour Party are started as a trade union organisation. If I recall, it was only the SNP MSPs who crossed the picket line at the recent PCS strikes up at the Scottish Parliament. So they did. So just to remind the SNP, when you attack the Labour Party, have a good look at yourself. Now, I've had a good look at the Labour Party, and I'm openly telling you what I think of their stands. So it's only fair that I say again, have a look at your own party, because your own MSPs, employment alone, and Inverclyde, I believe, crossed a picket line. As Jim says, two things you do: don't buy the sun and don't buy a picket line. Yeah. As to Councillor Daisley's motion, I would like to see this go to this a separate motion. The depth and breadth of this argument is wide. So as the S2UC, most of the trade unions are affiliated to the S2UC, but not all trade unionists support the S2UC, because the S2UC receive probably 7% of its funding from the Scottish Government, which then puts up the question, do you bite the hand that feeds? There has been a lot of trade unions that are not happy about some of the close arrangements between the STUC and the Scottish Government. So on that, I think this debate, this motion by Councillor Daisley would need to go in so we can get through these debates, because there's a lot of trade unions who don't support. I mean, Councillor Daisley's motion assumes that we all think the STUC are working in line in hand with workers. So a lot of people disagree with that. So I'll just end up with that. What I will say is, anybody, we can't be foolish enough to think this is anything other than an attack on workers' rights. So it is, and I'll just end with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. So we have a motion for Councillor Jackson, and we have two amendments. Mr. Strachan, please.
Yes, thank you, Robert. So I'll just briefly. So as Robert said, we have a motion by Councillor Jackson, seconded by Councillor Clockerty. We have the first amendment by Councillor Daisley, seconded by Councillor Crowther, and the second amendment proposed by Councillor Brooks, seconded by Councillor Wilson. And in terms of standing orders, we take them in reverse order. So we take the amendment. The first vote will be the amendments against each other. So the first vote is Councillor Daisley's amendment against Councillor Brooks' amendment. So I'll take those. So if we can ask you to indicate your vote for, against, or not voting. If it's easier, you can just say the name of the councillor whose amendment you're voting for. So we'll go to Councillor Brennan first. So the amendment of Councillor Daisley or Councillor Brooks, or abstaining?
Abstaining.
Okay. Councillor Brooks.
Councillor Brooks.
Councillor Cassidy.
Abstaining.
Councillor Clockerty.
Abstaining.
Councillor Crowther.
Councillor Daisley's amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Curley.
Councillor Daisley's amendment.
Councillor Daisley.
Councillor Daisley's amendment.
Councillor Jackson.
Abstain.
Councillor Law.
Councillor Daisley's amendment.
Thank you. Councillor McKay.
Abstain.
Councillor McCluskey.
Abstain.
Councillor McCormick.
Abstain.
Councillor Maguire.
Abstain.
Provost Mackenzie.
Councillor Davies.
Councillor McVeigh.
Abstain.
Councillor Moran.
Abstain.
Councillor Quinn.
Councillor Daisleys.
Councillor Reynolds.
Councillor Daisleys.
Councillor Robson.
Councillor Daisleys.
And Councillor Wilson.
Councillor Brooks.
Councillor Brooks. So Councillor Daisley's amendment is carried by 8 votes to 2 with 10 not voting, and Councillor Daisley's amendment becomes the substantive amendment. So the second vote is Councillor Daisley's amendment against Councillor Jackson's motion. So if you just want to say motion or amendment, Councillor Brennan, motion or amendment?
Motion.
Councillor Brooks?
Abstain.
Councillor Cassidy? Motion or amendment?
Motion.
Councillor Clougherty?
Motion.
Councillor Crowther?
Amendment.
Councillor Curley?
Amendment.
Councillor Daisley?
Amendment.
Councillor Jackson?
Motion.
Councillor Law?
Amendment.
Councillor McCabe?
Motion.
Councillor McCluskey?
Motion.
Councillor McCormick?
Motion.
Councillor Maguire?
Motion.
Provost Mackenzie?
Motion.
Councillor McVeigh?
Motion.
Councillor Moran?
Motion.
Councillor Quinn?
Motion.
Councillor Reynolds?
Amendment.
Councillor Robertson?
Amendment.
And Councillor Wilson?
Abstain.
So Councillor Jackson's motion is carried by 12 votes to 6 with 2 not voting.
Thank you, members. Thank you for a very interesting and stimulating debate. Thank you particularly for the courtesy that was exercised out there. There is one final bit of business. It's a business in the appendix. The minutes have already been approved, but there's minutes with private business attached to them. There's no need to go into private business unless somebody has any concerns regarding these minutes. Does anybody have any concerns?
No. Agreed.
Then we are agreed these minutes. Thank you for your attendance here today for members and officers.